Have you felt that inexplicable heaviness in your bedroom? A presence that disturbs your peace even when everything seems normal? Perhaps you've experienced recurring nightmares, unexplained anxiety as dusk approaches, or a sense of vulnerability during those quiet hours before sleep claims you. What if I told you that Padre Pio, one of the most mystical saints of the Church, revealed a simple yet profound spiritual remedy that thousands have used to transform their bedrooms from spaces of unrest to sanctuaries of divine protection? This isn't just another religious practice, it's a spiritual shield that the forces of darkness recognize and fear. The solution lies not in elaborate rituals or expensive objects, but in something so accessible yet profoundly powerful: having an image of the Blessed Virgin Mary in your bedroom. Padre Pio taught that this isn't merely a symbolic gesture or a decorative choice. According to his mystical insights, the visible presence of the Mother of God in the place where you sleep can attract special graces, provide protection against nocturnal temptations, and even deliver you from nightmares or demonic oppressions that target you at your most vulnerable state during sleep. But before I reveal the 3 essential principles of this teaching that have changed countless lives, you need to understand why so many people fail to receive these promised blessings despite having Marian images in their homes. Here's the critical truth that many don't realize. Not every image carries the same spiritual power, and not every placement allows Mary's protective presence to fully manifest. Many faithful, even with the best intentions, commit spiritual errors by placing sacred images near impure objects, or they neglect prayer before them, nullifying much of their spiritual force. Padre Pio, with his exceptional ability to see into the spiritual realm, warned that these seemingly minor oversights could leave you vulnerable precisely when you think you're protected. Tonight, I'll share with you his complete teaching about how to properly invite Mary's presence into your bedroom, a teaching that the saint insisted was crucial for spiritual warfare in these challenging times. You might be wondering why the bedroom specifically holds such spiritual significance in Padre Pio's teaching. The bedroom is not just a place of physical rest. It's where your soul is most receptive, where your spiritual defenses naturally lower as consciousness gives way to sleep. It's in these vulnerable moments that unwanted influences can more easily access your mind and spirit, planting seeds of disturbance, anxiety, or even spiritual oppression that manifest in your waking hours. Padre Pio understood that the hours of sleep represent nearly a third of our lives, a substantial portion of our existence during which our spiritual protection cannot be actively maintained through conscious prayer or vigilance. Having an image of Mary in this specific space creates a continuous shield of intercession that remains active even as you sleep. The Virgin Mary's presence, represented through her blessed image, establishes a spiritual atmosphere that repels negative energies and attracts heavenly protection. Padre Pio often told his spiritual children, "Where Mary enters, the devil immediately flees." This isn't poetic language or mere religious sentiment. It's a spiritual reality that countless believers have experienced. The saint could perceive with his mystical gifts how the demonic entities that roam seeking entry points into human lives would avoid rooms where Mary was properly honored. He explained that these forces recognize her as the woman described in Scripture who crushes the serpent's head, and they retreat from her presence like darkness dissipates before light. But there's a crucial distinction between merely having an image and establishing a true spiritual connection through that image. A distinction that determines whether you're just decorating your room or actually transforming it into a spiritual fortress. Many people make the grave error of treating sacred images as mere religious decor without understanding their true spiritual function. An image of Mary placed in your bedroom without proper devotion and regular prayer is like installing a powerful security system but never activating it. The physical presence of the image alone is not what provides protection. It's the relationship you establish with the Mother of God through that image, the prayers you direct toward heaven through her intercession, and the spiritual consciousness with which you regard her presence in your most private space. Padre Pio insisted that this relationship must be cultivated daily through specific devotional practices that I'll share with you shortly. These practices aren't complicated, but they must be performed with sincerity and consistency to open the channel through which Mary's protective grace can flow into your home and life. Before revealing the 3 pillars of Padre Pio's teaching on this subject, I need to address a common misunderstanding. Some believe that any religious image will suffice, or that the quality and placement of the image are secondary considerations. Padre Pio was quite specific about this. The image should ideally be one that inspires genuine devotion in your heart, one that helps you connect personally with the Mother of God. It doesn't need to be expensive or artistically exceptional. What matters most is that when you look at it, your heart is moved to prayer and reverence. The saint recommended images that depict Mary's gaze directly engaging with the viewer, as this visual connection symbolizes the spiritual communication that will develop through your devotion. Whether it's Our Lady of Guadalupe, the Immaculate, Heart of Mary, or any other Marian representation that speaks to your spirit, what's essential is that it evokes in you a sense of her maternal presence and protection. The placement of the image also carries spiritual significance. Padre Pio advised that the image should be visible from your bed, positioned where your eyes might naturally fall upon waking or before sleeping. This facilitates the habit of acknowledging Mary's presence at these critical transition points in your day. However, he strongly cautioned against placing sacred images near objects or media that might carry contradictory energies, televisions showing inappropriate content, materials that promote values contrary to spiritual growth, or items associated with practices incompatible with Christian faith. Such juxtapositions create spiritual discord in your space, like trying to play 2 different musical compositions simultaneously, resulting in disharmony rather than the peace that Mary's presence is meant to bring. If you believe that this teaching can transform your nights and consequently your days in the same way it has for countless devoted followers of Padre Pio, write in the comments, "I am ready for Mary's protection." Subscribe to our channel now to receive more powerful spiritual teachings that can transform your life through the wisdom of the saints. Remember that understanding this message is only the beginning. The true power comes when you apply it with faith and consistency. Now let me reveal to you the 3 essential pillars of Padre Pio's teaching that will allow you to fully benefit from Mary's protective presence in your bedroom, beginning tonight. The first pillar of Padre Pio's teaching about having Mary's image in your bedroom is what he called consecrated placement. This goes beyond merely hanging a picture or setting a statue on your nightstand. It involves a deliberate spiritual dedication of both the image and the space. Begin by having the image blessed by a priest if possible, as this connects it to the Church's sacramental system and distinguishes it from ordinary objects. Then, choose a moment when you can be undisturbed to formally install the image in your bedroom. Padre Pio recommended accompanying this placement with a specific prayer of invitation, asking Mary not just to be represented in your room but to actually extend her spiritual presence there. He taught that this initial consecration establishes a spiritual anchor point, like planting a seed that will grow into a powerful protective tree over time. Many who have followed this practice report an immediate sense of peace descending upon their bedroom, as if the atmosphere itself has been purified and elevated. Why is this consecrated placement so crucial? Padre Pio explained that there exists a profound connection between physical reality and spiritual reality. What we do in the material world can open doors in the spiritual realm. By consciously and prayerfully installing Mary's image, you are essentially creating a spiritual portal through which heavenly graces can more easily flow into your personal space. The saint often shared how he could see, with his mystical vision, the difference between rooms where images were simply hung as decorations versus those where they were placed with prayerful intention. In the latter, he described seeing a subtle luminosity surrounding the image, a spiritual radiance that extended throughout the room and repelled negative influences. This consecration isn't a one-time event, but establishes a foundation that must be maintained through the second pillar of his teaching. Many who attempt to follow this practice fail to experience its full benefits because they neglect this formal consecration, assuming that the mere presence of a religious image automatically provides protection. Padre Pio was clear. Intention matters in the spiritual realm. The forces that seek to disturb your peace recognize when an object is truly consecrated versus when it's merely decorative. The saint compared it to the difference between a switched-off lighthouse and one whose beam cuts powerfully through darkness. Both structures may look identical from a distance, but only one actually guides and protects those at sea. Similarly, an image of Mary placed with proper consecration becomes a spiritual lighthouse in your bedroom, guiding heavenly protection toward you during your most vulnerable hours and keeping at bay the storms of spiritual disturbance that might otherwise overwhelm your rest. The second pillar of Padre Pio's teaching is what he called devotional engagement, the ongoing relationship you maintain with the Virgin Mary through her image. An image without regular prayer directed toward it becomes spiritually dormant over time, like a telephone that's never used to make calls. Padre Pio advised establishing a nightly ritual of at least 3 minutes before Mary's image, ideally, right before getting into bed. During this brief but powerful practice, you acknowledge her presence, express gratitude for her protection, and specifically entrust to her the hours of vulnerability that lie ahead as you sleep. The exact words matter less than the sincerity of the heart. However, the saint did recommend including an explicit request for protection against nocturnal disturbances, bad dreams, and any negative influences that might seek entry into your mind or spirit during sleep. This nightly communication reactivates and strengthens the spiritual connection between you and the Queen of Heaven, ensuring that her protective mantle remains extended over you through the night. This devotional engagement serves multiple spiritual purposes. First, it establishes a consistent rhythm of acknowledgement that prevents the image from becoming invisible to you through familiarity, a common psychological phenomenon where objects we see daily eventually fade from our conscious awareness. Second, it creates a spiritual boundary between the activities of your day and the sacred time of rest, helping your soul transition from external concerns to internal peace. Third, and perhaps most importantly according to Padre Pio, it reinforces your spiritual intention to remain under Mary's protection, an act of will that strengthens the spiritual shields around your personal space. The saint explained that our free will is a powerful force in the spiritual realm, and by consciously choosing Mary's protection each night, we activate spiritual laws that even negative entities must respect. Many who have established this practice report that within weeks they notice not only improved sleep, but a gradual dissolution of anxieties that previously plagued their nights. Padre Pio warned about a common mistake in this area: inconsistency. Many begin this practice with enthusiasm, but allow it to fade as days pass, not realizing that spiritual protection, like any relationship, requires regular renewal. The saint compared it to tending a garden. A few days of neglect won't destroy it entirely, but the protective barriers begin to weaken, allowing unwanted elements to gradually encroach. He emphasized that even on nights when you're exhausted or distracted, even a brief 30-second acknowledgement of Mary's presence and request for her protection is far better than complete omission. For those who travel frequently, he suggested carrying a small Marian image to establish temporary protection in hotel rooms or other sleeping spaces, maintaining the continuity of this spiritual practice regardless of location. This consistency is what transforms a good religious practice into a powerful spiritual discipline with tangible effects on your life and well-being. The third pillar of Padre Pio's teaching on this subject is what he termed evidential awareness, learning to recognize the signs that Mary's protective presence is actively working in your bedroom. Many expect dramatic manifestations or immediate miracles, and seeing none, conclude that the practice is ineffective. However, Padre Pio taught that Mary typically works in subtle yet profound ways, and learning to discern these quieter signs is essential to deepening your faith and commitment to this devotion. The first sign he identified is a gradual but noticeable improvement in sleep quality. Not necessarily sleeping longer, but experiencing deeper rest that leaves you more refreshed upon waking. This improved sleep comes from the spiritual peace that Mary's presence brings to your room, calming the often unconscious anxieties and spiritual disturbances that typically fragment sleep patterns. Many who maintain this devotion report that, within 3 weeks, they begin to experience nights of sleep that restore them in ways they hadn't thought possible. The second sign of Mary's active presence is what Padre Pio described as protected dreaming, a shift in the nature and emotional tone of your dreams. While not eliminating all challenging dreams, which sometimes serve important psychological purposes, Mary's protection tends to prevent the truly disturbing nightmares that leave lasting fear or distress. Additionally, many report occasionally experiencing dreams with spiritual significance, dreams that provide guidance, comfort, or insight, sometimes featuring Mary herself, offering maternal wisdom. The saint explained that sleep temporarily thins the veil between material and spiritual reality, making us more receptive to both negative and positive influences. With Mary's protection established in your bedroom, this natural spiritual receptivity becomes directed toward heaven rather than being vulnerable to lower energies. Some of Padre Pio's spiritual children kept dream journals and discovered over time patterns of spiritual guidance that had profoundly positive effects on their waking decisions and spiritual growth. The third, and perhaps most significant, sign is a gradual transformation of your bedroom's atmosphere, a sense of sanctuary that becomes increasingly perceptible, not just to you but often to others who enter the space. Padre Pio described it as a spiritual fragrance that develops over time, as Mary's presence purifies the energetic residue that accumulates in places where we experience the full range of human emotions. People who maintain this devotion for several months often report that their bedroom becomes a place they intuitively turn to when seeking peace, clarity, or spiritual comfort during difficult times. Some even notice that arguments or negative interactions seem to naturally dissipate when they occur in this space, as if the atmosphere itself gently discourages disharmony. The saint emphasized that this transformation doesn't happen overnight. It develops like the slow saturation of a fabric with fragrance, gradually becoming more pronounced until it becomes a defining characteristic of the space. This patient awareness of subtle yet meaningful changes sustains the practice through periods when immediate results might seem less evident. Beyond establishing these three pillars in your own bedroom, Padre Pio taught that there's a special power in extending this practice to protect those you love, particularly children whose spiritual sensitivity makes them especially vulnerable to negative influences during sleep. The saint was known to have a particular concern for children's spiritual welfare, often perceiving with his mystical sight how their unguarded imaginative capacity could become an entry point for disturbing influences that manifested as night terrors, unexplained fears, or behavioral issues. He strongly advised parents to place a suitable image of Mary in their children's bedrooms, explaining the practice in age-appropriate terms that emphasized her loving maternal protection rather than the negative forces being warded against. Many parents who have implemented this teaching report remarkable transformations in previously troubled children's sleep patterns, with night terrors subsiding and a new sense of security emerging, often described by the children themselves as feeling watched over or not alone anymore in a comforting way. The protection extends beyond children to anyone experiencing a period of particular spiritual vulnerability. Padre Pio especially recommended this practice for those undergoing major life transitions, grief, recovery from addiction, healing from trauma, or spiritual awakening, times when the soul's natural defenses may be temporarily compromised. He explained that these transitional periods, while often rich with potential for growth, also create openings that negative influences can exploit, manifesting as increased anxiety, disturbing thoughts, or the resurgence of destructive patterns, just when healing seems within reach. The saint described Mary's protective presence as a spiritual immune system for these vulnerable times, creating a space where healing can proceed without interference. Many who have applied this teaching during difficult transitions report that their bedroom became a crucial sanctuary, where they could retreat to regain equilibrium when external challenges threatened to overwhelm their progress. This expanded protection demonstrates an important aspect of Marian devotion that Padre Pio emphasized: its naturally expansive quality. When properly established, Mary's protective presence in your bedroom doesn't remain confined to that single space but begins to extend outward, gradually influencing the spiritual atmosphere of your entire home and eventually affecting your interactions beyond its walls. The saint described this as the spillover effect of authentic Marian devotion, explaining that just as Mary's first instinct upon receiving the news of her divine pregnancy was to travel to help her cousin Elizabeth, so too does her spiritual presence naturally move outward to bring blessings to others connected to those who honor her. Many who maintain this devotion over years report that friends and family members often comment on the distinctive peace they feel when visiting their homes, sometimes even expressing curiosity about the source of this atmosphere. This creates natural opportunities to share the teaching with others, extending Mary's protective network to encompass an ever-widening circle of beneficiaries. A critical aspect of Padre Pio's teaching that is often overlooked concerns the need for periodic renewal of your bedroom's consecration to Mary. The saint explained that while the initial consecration establishes a powerful foundation, the accumulation of daily life, stress, conflicts, spiritual struggles, and even the invisible influences we inadvertently bring home from our various activities, gradually creates what he called spiritual sediment that can diminish the clarity and strength of Mary's protective presence. Therefore, he recommended performing a simple but intentional renewal ceremony approximately every 3 months, or more frequently during particularly challenging periods. This renewal involves cleaning the area around Mary's image, refreshing it with new candles or flowers if possible, and reciting a prayer that explicitly reaffirms your invitation for her protective presence. Many who follow this practice report experiencing a tangible refreshing of their bedroom's atmosphere afterward, as if the spiritual air itself has been cleared and purified. Padre Pio also provided guidance for handling apparent failures of this protection, times when, despite maintaining the practice, you might still experience disturbed sleep, troubling dreams, or a sense of heaviness in your bedroom. Rather than interpreting these as evidence that the practice doesn't work, the saint explained that such moments often indicate one of two things: either a need for deeper cleansing of the space, which might require additional spiritual measures beyond the scope of this teaching, or more frequently, an opportunity for spiritual growth through confronting specific issues that need addressing in your waking life. He taught that Mary's protection doesn't always mean complete elimination of challenges. Sometimes her maternal wisdom allows certain difficulties to persist until we recognize and address their root causes. Many who have persevered through such periods report that these apparent failures ultimately led to important insights or necessary life changes that might not have occurred if the uncomfortable symptoms had been immediately removed. Perhaps most importantly, Padre Pio emphasized that this practice, while powerful in itself, reaches its full potential when integrated into a broader spiritual life. The bedroom protection is not meant to be an isolated practice, but one element in a comprehensive approach to spiritual well-being. The saint observed that those who experienced the most profound and lasting benefits were those who also maintained regular prayer, participated in their faith community, worked on their character development, and strived to align their actions with their spiritual values. He compared it to a healthy body. While strengthening one muscle group is beneficial, true wellness requires attention to the entire system. Similarly, while establishing Mary's protective presence in your bedroom creates a sanctuary of spiritual safety, its effects multiply when connected to other aspects of spiritual practice. Many who have followed this integrated approach describe experiencing not just protection from negative influences, but a positive transformation of their spiritual life, with Mary's presence becoming a gateway to deeper connection with divine grace and guidance. As you prepare to implement this teaching in your own bedroom tonight, it's important to understand that the results you experience will be uniquely yours. Padre Pio observed that Mary's motherly wisdom adapts her protection to the specific needs of each person who invites her presence. For some, the effects manifest primarily as emotional healing, a gradual softening of anxieties or fears that have disrupted sleep for years. For others, the changes appear more in the mental realm: increased clarity of thought upon waking, inspirational insights during that twilight state between sleeping and waking, or a newfound ability to solve problems that previously seemed insurmountable. Still others notice the effects most strongly in the spiritual dimension: a deepening prayer life, increased sensitivity to guidance, or a more tangible sense of divine presence throughout their days. The saint encouraged paying attention to these personalized patterns of blessing, keeping a simple journal of changes you notice in the weeks following the establishment of Mary's image in your bedroom. This attentiveness itself becomes a form of devotion, an acknowledgement of the subtle yet transformative ways heaven interacts with our daily lives. The timing of these manifestations also varies widely, according to individual circumstances. Padre Pio cautioned against the modern expectation of immediate results, explaining that spiritual transformations typically unfold according to a different timeline Then material changes. Some people, particularly those who have no significant spiritual blockages or whose life circumstances have created a deep readiness for Mary's intervention, report dramatic effects within the first few days. Sudden improvements in sleep quality, a palpable lifting of heaviness from their bedroom, or an unexpected sense of comfort and security that seems to descend upon them as they prepare for sleep. Others experience a more gradual unfolding over weeks or even months, with changes so subtle at first that they might only recognize them in retrospect, looking back to realize how significantly their sleep experience and overall well-being have improved since beginning the practice. The saint emphasized patience and persistence, assuring his spiritual children that Mary's timeline, while sometimes slower than we might wish, is always perfectly calibrated to our true needs and highest good. The final and perhaps most profound aspect of Padre Pio's teaching on this subject concerns what he called the reciprocal relationship that develops over time between you and the Mother of God through this practice. What begins as a simple request for protection gradually evolves, for many who maintain the devotion, into a genuine spiritual friendship with Mary. The saint described how this relationship typically deepens through recognizable stages, from initial petition, asking for protection, to gratitude, acknowledging the benefits received, to conversation, sharing your concerns and joys with her before sleep, and finally to communion, experiencing her guidance and wisdom as an integral part of your spiritual journey. Many who reach this deeper level report that Mary's influence extends far beyond protection during sleep. She becomes a spiritual mentor whose maternal wisdom guides important decisions, helps navigate relationships, and gently redirects when they stray from their highest path. The bedroom image, initially sought for its protective benefits, ultimately becomes a portal to this broader relationship, a tangible point of connection to a spiritual presence that increasingly permeates all aspects of life. As Padre Pio often told those who came to him for guidance, where Mary enters, everything changes. First your nights, then your days, and finally your entire life. Do not wait for perfect circumstances to begin this practice. The moment to transform your bedroom into a sanctuary of Mary's protection is now, tonight before you lay your head down to sleep.